Raymond Poincaré was a French statesman who served 3 times as Prime Minister of France, and as President of France from 1913 to 1920. He was a conservative leader, primarily committed to political and social stability. Trained in law, Poincaré was elected as a deputy in 1887 and served in the cabinets of Dupuy and Ribot. In 1902, he co-founded the Democratic-Republican Alliance, the most important centre-right party under the Third Republic, becoming prime minister in 1912 and president in 1913. He was noted for his strongly anti-German attitudes, and twice visited Russia to maintain strategic ties. At the Paris Peace Conference, he favored reoccupation of the Rhineland, which he was able to carry out in 1923 as prime minister. Early years. Born in Bar-le-Duc, Meuse, France, Raymond Poincaré was the son of Nicolas Antonin Hélène Poincaré, a distinguished civil servant and meteorologist. Raymond was also the cousin of Henri Poincaré, the famous mathematician. Educated at the University of Paris, Raymond was called to the Paris bar, and was for some time law editor of the Voltaire. Extremely ambitious and hard-working with a ferocious desire to be the best at everything he did, he became at the age of 20 the youngest lawyer in France. As a lawyer, he successfully defended Jules Verne in a libel suit presented against the famous author by the chemist Eugene Turpin, inventor of the explosive melinite, who claimed that the mad scientist character in Verne's book Facing the Flag was based on him. At the age of 26, Poincaré was elected to the Chamber of Deputies, making him the youngest deputy in the entire chamber. Early political career. Poincaré had served for over a year in the Department of Agriculture when in 1887 he was elected deputy for the Meuse département. He made a great reputation in the chamber as an economist, and sat on the budget commissions of 1890 to 1891 and 1892. He was Minister of Education, Fine Arts and Religion in the first cabinet of Charles Dupuy, and Minister of Finance in the second and third. In Alexandre Ribot's cabinet, Poincaré became Minister of Public Instruction, although he was excluded from the radical cabinet which followed. The revised scheme of death duties proposed by the new ministry was based upon his proposals of the previous year. He became vice president of the chamber in the autumn of 1895, and in spite of the bitter hostility of the radicals retained his position in 1896 and 1897. Along with other followers of opportunist Eliaquet Gambetta, Poincaré founded the Democratic-Republican Alliance in 1902, which became the most important centre-right party under the Third Republic. In 1906 he returned to the Ministry of Finance in the short-lived Sarrian ministry. Poincaré had retained his practice at the bar during his political career, and he published several volumes of essays on literary and political subjects. Poincarism was a political movement, 1902–20. After 1911 the term was used to mean national renewal when faced with the German threat. After the First World War, Poincarism refers to his support of business and financial interests. Poincaré was noted for his lifelong feud with Georges Clemenceau. Clemenceau and Poincaré absolutely detested one another, and engaged in one of the longest-running feuds in French politics. The British historian Anthony Adam Thwaite described Poincaré as having an obsession with Clemenceau verging on paranoia, and as of cold fish whose one passion was cats. First premiership. Poincaré became prime minister in January 1912, and began a policy meant to block Germany's ambitions for world power status, and worked to restore ties France's ally Russia. During the Bosnia crisis of 1908–1909, the Franco-Russian alliance had been badly strained when France refused to support Russia when Austria supported by Germany, threatened war. During the Second Moroccan Crisis in 1911, Russia refused to support France when Germany threatened war. The lack of French interest in supporting Russia during the Bosnia crisis was the nadir of Franco-Russian relations, with the Emperor Nicholas II making no effort to hide his displeasure at the lack of support from what was supposed to be his number one ally. At the time, Nicholas seriously considered abrogating the alliance with France, and was only stopped by the lack of an alternative. Russia's refusal to support France during the Second Moroccan Crisis in 1911 reflected the enduring bitterness caused in St. Petersburg by France's refusal to support Russia during the Bosnia crisis, which ended with Russia humiliated. From Poincaré's viewpoint, the weakening of the Franco-Russian alliance could only benefit Germany. In 1911, the Second Moroccan Crisis had led to Germany and France almost going to war, something that Poincaré believed was caused in part because of the lingering Franco-Russian rift. Encouraged Germany to believe that it was possible to threaten war with France, as the Russians might not honor the alliance. In August 1912, Poincaré visited Russia to meet Nicholas in order to strengthen ties between Russia and France. Poincaré believed that a stronger Franco-Russian alliance would deter Germany from risking a war with either power, and thus avoid a repeat of the Second Moroccan Crisis. The Russian elite, despite its Francophilia, was generally disdainful of most of the leaders of the Third Republic, but Poincaré was an exception. Regarded in St. Petersburg as a strong leader who meant what he said, the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Sazonov, in a report to Nicholas, stated that after meeting Poincaré that Russia possesses a sure and faithful friend, endowed with a political spirit above the line and an inflexible will. But at the same time, Poincaré was by no means as anti-German as traditionally painted, and favored improving relations with Germany in order to allow France to pursue an expansionist policy at the expense of the Reich's unofficial ally, the Ottoman Empire. For historical, economic and religious reasons, the French had traditionally been very interested in the Levant region of the Middle East. France had for centuries been the protector of the Maronite Christians, most recently in 1860, when France had threatened war following the massacres of the Maronites by local Muslims and Druze, while the Ottoman authorities did nothing. In the early years of the 20th century, there was an influential Levant lobby within France that argued that it was France's mission to take over Ottoman Syria. Poincaré was a leading member of the Comité de l'Orient, the main group that advocated French expansionism in the Middle East. Poincaré's willingness to begin a rapprochement with Germany in order to allow France to pursue its ambitions in the Middle East was strengthened by the outcome of the First Balkan War, where Bulgaria, whose army had been trained by a French military mission, rapidly defeated the Ottoman Empire, whose army had been trained by a German military mission. Bulgaria's swift victory over the Ottomans was a great blow to the prestige of the German military, and correspondingly boosted the prestige of the French military, something that allowed Poincaré to approach Berlin from a position of strength. Poincaré's policy towards the Reich stood midway between those like Joseph Caillaux, who wished for a Franco-German understanding, and those like Georges Clemenceau, who favored a hard line with the Germans. Poincaré believed that the best policy was one of firmness, where France would assert its interests forcefully, while at the same time by no means excluded the possibility of better relations. After the defeat in the Franco-German War of 1870–71, French elites concluded that France could never hope to defeat Germany on its own, and the way to defeat the Reich would be with the help of another great power. Besides, for Germany's military superiority, the Reich had demographic superiority with 70 million people compared to France's 40 million people, and economic superiority, as the German economy was 3 times larger than the French economy. For all these reasons, Poincaré rejected Guy Fawkes's ideas about creating a Franco-German alliance, as he argued that in any Franco-German partnership inevitably Germany's greater strength would make Berlin the superior partner and Paris the junior partner, thus being tantamount to ending France as a great power. Poincaré argued for the Franco-Russian alliance as the cornerstone of French foreign policy because the Franco-Russian alliance was between two more or less equal powers and thus would preserve France's status as a great power. Poincaré's entire foreign policy was based on the old Roman saying si vis pacem, para bellum. Poincaré wanted to strengthen both France and Russia to such a point that they presented such a decisive margin of superiority as to deter Germany from going to war with either power. But at the same time his foreign policy was not relentlessly anti-German. Poincaré was prepared to work with Berlin to improve Franco-German relations on specific issues, but rejected Guy Fawkes's ideas about creating a Franco-German alliance. A fiscal conservative, Poincaré was deeply concerned about the financial effects of the arms race with Germany, and had no desire to keep Franco-German relations in such a state of tension that the arms race would continue to devour more and more of the French budget. Despite being from Lorraine, Poincaré was not a revanchardeur. As a 10-year-old in 1870, Poincaré had seen close-up horribly wounded and mutilated soldiers during the Franco-German War, an experience that left him with a lifelong distaste for war. Poincaré's foreign policy was essentially defensive as he wished to maintain France as a great power in face of Germany's demands for Weltpolitik, under which the Reich sought to become the world's dominant power. Poincaré's speeches warning of the German menace were not the rantings of a revanchist intent upon war, but rather an attack on Guy Fawkes's policy of reaching an understanding with Berlin that he believed threatened France's great power status. Poincaré always believed that Wilhelm II only respected the strong, and a policy of conciliation and concessions such as that advocated by Caillaux was dangerous because it created the impression of French weakness. The Canadian historians Holger Herwick and Richard Hamilton described Poincaré as typically for a man on the right side of the Republican center. Poincaré was anti-clerical, but not anti-religious, nationalist, but not bellicose, a defender of property rights, free markets and small government. No ideologue, he was a practical politician willing to work with any true Frenchman but adamant in defending France from the socialist left, the Catholic right and, of course, Germany.